Michael Bloomberg, to me, is nothing but a big fraud. And since he's come to the forefront to run for president, the first thing he did was apologize, call himself apologizing to the Black community for stop and frisk. But the whole time this man was mayor, he was not sorry at all. And actually went in Black people's faces to let you know he wasn't going to do nothing about it, and he didn't give a damn about how you felt. So here we are in 2020, and he's just so apologetic and want to acknowledge and all this stuff. But I'm telling you, this man is a fraud. He's the worst kind of fraud. So this is Politico. To win Black support, Bloomberg acknowledges white privilege. I tell you what, he wouldn't win me over with that. But let's get into this article. Mike Bloomberg began his presidential campaign with an apology to the African Americans and acknowledgement of the racial inequities spurred by the controversial stop and frisk policing practice he oversaw as New York City mayor. And he did not care. There were a lot of lives messed up from stop and frisk. People had drugs planted on them that way. Women were felt up by cops. You just can't imagine everything that happened. See, I'm in the neighboring state, so I would get a lot of the news out of New York. It was also a recognition of a political realities confronting a campaign for the Democratic nominee that hinges on a strong performance on Super Tuesday when Black voters, went out and cast their votes. See, Michael Bloomberg, if he really cared about Black people, he would have showed it a long time ago. But showing it at the time when you trying to run for president, that's pretty damn lame. Okay. And he has to appeal to the Black vote, ladies and gentlemen, because without it, these candidates can't win. They can't win. They cannot beat the Republicans unless the Black community step up and vote. White people in the Democratic Party, it's not enough for them to win a presidential election. It's just not enough of them. So they can't do it without us. Bloomberg has so far amassed a roster of surrogates that include prominent Black politicians, traveled to cities with large Black populations like Oakland, Detroit, and Cleveland to solicit input on policy and unveil proposals on issues central to many Black communities, such as maternal mortality and incarcerated youth. Aides point to his work on education, gun control, and job creation in addressing concerns he faces among Black voters. I think he has challenges, but he has, I think, made a more than expected attempt to deal with the challenges. No, he didn't. This is what Al Sharpton said. No, he didn't. He didn't even scratch the surface with Black people. He really didn't. Stop and frisk left a lot of people, especially in his home state of New York, very bitter. And I don't blame them. They have every right to be that way. Wow. Bloomberg went to, of course, another Black church, Vernon Chapel AME Church, before delivering the most sweeping and anticipated address of his young campaign, a plan to increase job opportunities and home ownership in Black neighborhoods and investing $70 billion in struggling areas across the country. I don't believe none of this. Okay. I'm just telling you, he's the kind of person, as soon as he gets what he wants, he gonna bail on the Black community. Trust me on this one. I've seen these types of people before. His pitch, which takes the name from Greenwood section of Tulsa, known as Black Wall Street, that was destroyed in, it was destroyed by white mobs that were jealous that Black people were prospering in 1921, and was designed to tackle the systematic bias keeping many African Americans from advancement. As he put to parishioners at the church, righting what I think are historic wrongs and creating opportunity and wealth in Black communities. Heard it all before, y'all. I'm sorry, I don't believe nothing this man says. I don't believe him. Bloomberg's strategy of skipping the first four voting states, underwritten by a vast fortune, has him a wide opening playing field in areas with large Black populations to try to define himself to voters, many of whom have stuck with former Vice President Joe Biden. I don't think either one of them are worthy of the Black vote. In the speech Sunday, the billionaire who made his fortune on New York Wall Street went even further to acknowledge his white privilege. As someone who has been very lucky in life, I often say my story would only have been possible in America. And I think that's true, Bloomberg said, as hundreds filled Greenwood Hall and spilled into an overflow room. But I also know that my story might have turned out very different if I had been Black, and that more Black Americans of my generation would have ended up with far more wealth had they been white. Well, so in my opinion, y'all, that's an admission that they know they have sabotaged this system where we cannot gain wealth at the same rate that white people can gain wealth. That's an admission. Instead, he said, they've had to struggle to overcome great odds. That's because, we wouldn't have those great odds if we weren't being sabotaged every step of the way. Because their families started out further behind and excluded from opportunities in housing, in employment, education, and other areas. Bloomberg's plan calls for 1 million new Black homeowners and 100,000 new Black owned businesses in the next decade. We could have those businesses out here if banks were not automatically denying us based on race, and also being sabotaged in this rigged up system. Banks would need to update their credit scoring requirements, while he'd also create a housing fairness commission funded with an initial $10 billion. I don't know, y'all. Are you impressed with any of this stuff? If we weren't sabotaged, you wouldn't have to present any of this stuff. Mm-mm-mm. Wow. Several prominent Black political and business leaders were on hand from across the country, with Chicago heavyweight John Rogers Jr. introducing former mayor and telling Politico that he made his endorsement. I'm with him all day, all the way. Rogers said, well, you can find a coon everywhere. So, it's just him again talking about stop and frisk, and he can't tell you how sorry he is. He's so sorry, Black people, I'm so sorry. All I have to say is I don't know why anybody, after looking at Bloomberg's track record, would think he would be a good president. The only thing we would get out of this man is ignored, because they all do it. Whenever the election season come, they want to promise you the moon and stars. And then when they get in office, they don't know who you are anymore. You know, that game has gotten very old and stale at this point. And I don't believe anybody should be falling for this anymore. I seriously, I don't care what Michael Bloomberg is offering. I wouldn't want it. I really wouldn't. As of yet, there is no president that have came into office and closed up the wealth gap between black and white. And they never will. They never will. Just understand that these folks have an agenda. Their agenda is to keep themselves on top and keep us as far down at the bottom as possible. And that agenda is going to continue no matter who's in office. Michael Bloomberg, I don't trust him no more than I trust any of the other Democratic candidates. I don't believe we have any good choices in this election cycle among the Democrats. Remember, stop and frisk happened under a Democratic mayor. Never forget that. Michael Bloomberg is a Democrat. He came up with stop and frisk when he was the mayor. This was when a Democrat was the mayor. Democrats have a long history of hating us, but they have done it in a very covert way. And Michael Bloomberg, he simply didn't care. There were a lot of complaints about stop and frisk when it was going on. And a lot of those cops were doing many illegal things to the citizens, that they were stop and frisking and robbed citizens of money. It was all kinds of things coming out of stop and frisk. And he never cared. So how can anybody believe him now? I sure don't. I don't care how many black audiences this man gets in front of. I could never trust him. But y'all, please tell me what you think. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family.